This blind cat refused to be adopted by anyone, until the vet revealed why. Behind the cage bars, 17 families had tried. 17 families had failed. And in 4 months, if nobody solved the mystery, Milo would die. Before we begin, please click subscribe and tell me in the comments where you are watching from. Let's continue. The adoption papers lay torn on the shelter floor. Milo had done it again. The 17th return in 2 years, the 4th attempt in 3 months. "I don't understand," Nora said, staring at the soft bandage mask across his ruined eyes. "What is wrong with him?" Nobody knew the answer. Milo was not sick, not aggressive, not old. He simply refused to leave. Every family started the same way. They saw him behind the bars. They fell in love immediately. Brown tabby fur with perfect stripes. White whiskers like radar. A face that looked serene despite the blindness. "We want this one," they would say. The shelter staff would warn them. "Milo has been returned many times. He's special needs, blind, and something happens in homes that we can't explain." "We're different," families always replied. "We'll make it work." They never did. Milo had a pattern, a perfect, heartbreaking pattern. He would seem fine at first, calm in the carrier, quiet during the drive, soft and still when you set him down. But once inside their homes, everything changed. He would hide under beds for days, refusing to come out, refusing to eat, refusing to drink. His ears would swivel constantly, tracking sounds no one else could hear. Some families tried treat trails, scent markers, quiet music. Some tried leaving him completely alone, in a safe room. Nothing worked. Milo would lose weight rapidly, dangerously. The families would panic. They would call the shelter at midnight, voices tight with fear. They would bring him back. "Something is wrong with him," they would say. "It's like he wants to disappear." Other families experienced different problems. Milo would erupt at night. Sudden, explosive episodes. Tearing at curtains, clawing along baseboards, scattering books, and knocking over lamps, as if chasing invisible walls through rooms that felt wrong. One family returned him after 5 days. He destroyed the bedroom. He was frantic. We couldn't calm him down. Another family lasted 2 weeks. He froze every time the air conditioner kicked on. Then he'd hide for hours. Our daughter cried every night. The worst was the Chen family. They had tried everything. They spent over $400, acoustic panels to dampen echoes, a white noise machine, 3 different behaviorist consultations. Milo refused it all. He lost 2 pounds in 9 days. Mrs. Chen brought him back with tears on her face and a check she wouldn't accept a refund for. "Keep it for his care," she whispered. "I thought love would be enough, but he's searching for something we can't give him." The shelter director updated the whiteboard with one more red X. 17 families. 17 failures. The budget meetings got tighter. The intake numbers climbed after a warehouse closure nearby. The board of directors used words like non-adoptable and liability and limited resources. Someone said the word schedule as if a life were just logistics. Nora fought for 4 months. Give him 4 months. Let us try everything. The vote barely passed. 4 months to solve a mystery no one understood. 4 months to find out why a blind cat who was gentle, healthy, and beautiful would not accept a home. The clock started ticking. Milo had arrived 2 winters ago with a bandage across his eyes and the hush of a creature who had learned to move without being seen. He wasn't sick, the intake vet confirmed, not beyond the blindness. The corneal scarring was old, already healed into opacity by the time he reached the shelter. Smoke damage, most likely. The partial records from a mobile disaster clinic were sparse, just a registration number, a date, and a single word: Harborview. The staff didn't press. Half the animals that came through after the apartment fire had incomplete paperwork. What mattered was that Milo was young, neutered, stable, adoptable, in theory. In practice, he became something else entirely. In the shelter, Milo was quiet royalty. He moved through his enclosure with the precision of a surveyor, whiskers brushing the mesh walls, paws stepping in the same pattern every time. His ears swiveled like satellite dishes, always listening. The hum of the ventilation system. The water line shudder when someone flushed a toilet 3 rooms over. The particular bootfall of each volunteer. Rachel's sneakers squeak, Tom's heel drag, Nora's brisk, even stride. He knew the shelter better than most of the humans who worked there. Visitors would coo at his stripes and press their faces to the bars. Oh, look at him. He's so calm, so sweet. The staff tried to guide hands through the mesh to the spot where his whiskers were longest, where a gentle scratch might coax a purr. Milo would tilt his head, considering. Then he would turn away, a slow pivot that felt less like rejection and more like consultation with some invisible catalog. Not this one, his body seemed to say. Not yet. The adoption photos went up anyway. Professional shots with soft lighting. Milo's face angled just right so the bandage looked less like tragedy and more like character. The write-up was honest. Milo is a special needs cat who has had difficulty adjusting to homes. He requires a patient adopter willing to work with his blindness and behavioral quirks. Experience with special needs animals preferred. The applications came in like clockwork, and one by one, the red X's bloomed. The volunteers kept a log. Not officially, Nora had banned failure documentation after the 7th return, but in a shared notebook hidden under the reception desk, they tracked the patterns anyway. Return 8, Martinez family, hid under guest bed for 6 days, refused all food, including tuna, chicken broth, even baby food. Weight dropped 12 Oz. Vet said another day, and we'd need an IV. Return 11, Patterson, single male, architect, calm for 48 hours, then destroyed 3 curtain panels and shredded a leather ottoman at 3 a.m. Said Milo was attacking things that weren't there. Looked exhausted. Didn't ask for refund. Return 14, Kim Ross family, 2 moms, 1 toddler. Milo hissed every time the furnace kicked on. Scratched eldest mom's hand when she tried to comfort him during an episode. They cried when they brought him back. Said they were sorry they failed him. Nobody was failing Milo. Milo was failing them. Or so it seemed. Nora read the entries late at night when the shelter was down to the hum of refrigerators and the occasional bark from the overnight boarders. She cross-referenced the notes with the intake records, looking for a pattern she could name. A trigger she could train around. She found nothing. Some families had dogs, others didn't. Some had children. Others were retired couples with silent houses. Some lived in apartments with thin walls, others in sprawling suburban homes with cathedral ceilings. The only constant was Milo's refusal. And the clock. The budget crisis arrived on a Tuesday, delivered in a manila envelope with the county logo embossed in the corner. Nora opened it in her office, door closed. Knowing before she read the first line that the numbers wouldn't add up. They never did anymore. Funding reduction, 18% effective next quarter. Projected intake increase, 22% due to housing displacement, warehouse district closure. Current overcapacity rate, 34%. The math was simple and brutal. They couldn't keep every animal indefinitely. The county required adoption or transfer within 90 days for healthy animals, longer for medical cases. Milo had been there for 23 months. He wasn't healthy anymore. Not in the way the county meant. 17 failed placements had turned him into a statistic, a line item that cost more than he returned. Specialty food for weight management, behavioral consults. The staff hours spent coaxing him to eat after every return. The slow rebuilding of trust that evaporated the moment he crossed another threshold. The board meeting was scheduled for Thursday. Nora already knew what they'd say. She called an emergency staff meeting Wednesday night. They gathered in the break room after hours, 6 volunteers and 2 part-time vet techs, sitting on matched chairs with mugs of coffee gone cold. Nora stood by the whiteboard, marker in hand, Milo's name written at the top in blue ink. "They're going to ask us to make a decision," she said. Nobody asked what kind of decision. They all knew. Rachel, the youngest volunteer, spoke first. "He's not suffering. He's happy here." "He's institutionalized," Tom countered quietly. "He only works in this environment. Nowhere else." "Then maybe this is his home," Rachel said. "Maybe we stop trying to place him." Nora shook her head. "We can't. The county won't fund a permanent sanctuary resident. We'd lose our contract, and without that contract, we lose the building, the medical budget, everything." The silence stretched. "So what are you asking?" one of the techs said. Nora exhaled. "I'm asking for 4 months. I told the board I'd present a plan, something new, something we haven't tried. If we can show progress, they'll give us time." "And if we can't?" Nora didn't answer. She didn't have to. Rachel's eyes welled. "He didn't do anything wrong." "I know. He's just lost." "I know." Tom leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "What's the plan?" Nora turned to the whiteboard and started writing. The next morning, they moved Milo's enclosure. It had been in the back row, tucked between the senior cats and the long-term medical cases, quiet, low traffic, predictable. Exactly the environment where Milo thrived. Now they wheeled it to the front room, right by the main entrance where the weekend crowds would see him first. "It's cruel," Rachel muttered, helping guide the kennel past the dog corridor. "It's visibility," Nora replied. "If the right person exists, they need to see him." Milo didn't protest the move. He sat in the center of his crate, head angled slightly left, tracking the change in acoustics as they rolled him through the hallway. The echoes shifted. The foot traffic multiplied. A child's laugh bounced off tile and made his ears flick. When they locked the wheels in place by the window, Milo stood, stretched, and began his survey. 3 steps forward, 2 steps right, nose to the mesh. He cataloged the new hums, the door's pneumatic hiss, the coffee maker's gurgle at the volunteer desk, the HVAC vent directly overhead. Then he sat, wrapped his tail around his paws, and waited. The red X's had followed him to the new location. 17 cards, each one representing a family, a hope, a failure. The staff had taped them to the wall behind his enclosure in a grid. A reminder, a record, a prayer that 18 would be different. Behind the bars, Milo's whiskers trembled. His nose lifted. Somewhere beyond the glass doors, winter was settling in. The building's ducts began to change their song as the furnace cycled on for the first time in weeks. The sound was low, throaty, almost like a voice. Milo's ears locked forward. He tilted his head as if listening for something just beyond the frequencies the humans could hear. Something familiar. Something he'd been waiting for. Nora stood at the reception desk, updating the weekend schedule, when she felt the shift in the room. Milo had gone still, not the relaxed stillness of sleep, the absolute stillness of a predator who had just caught a scent on the wind. She glanced over. His nose was pressed to the mesh, his whole body angled toward the door. "What is it, buddy?" she whispered. Milo didn't move. Nora looked out the window. The parking lot was empty, except for 2 cars and a pickup truck with a missing tailgate. No one was coming. No one was scheduled. But Milo stayed frozen, listening. Listening for something the shelter had never been able to give him. Listening for home. Saturday mornings transformed the shelter into controlled chaos. The doors opened at 9. By 9:15, the front room was a carnival of sound, stroller wheels squeaking across tile, children's voices ricocheting off windows, dogs barking from the adjacent corridor, the jangle of leashes and keys, and the pneumatic whoosh of the entrance every 30 seconds. Milo sat in his corner like a statue. His ears swiveled constantly, tracking the cacophony, but he didn't move, didn't flinch, just catalogued each frequency with the patience of someone who'd learned that chaos eventually passed. Rachel positioned herself near his enclosure, half guardian, half interpreter. She'd memorized his signals by now. The slight ear flatten when sounds overlapped too sharply. The whisker twitch when someone approached too fast. The way his tail tip curled when he was processing something unfamiliar. "You okay, buddy?" she whispered. Milo's nose lifted fractionally. Not a response, just acknowledgement. A toddler stumbled past, shrieking with delight. Milo's ears pinned back for half a second, then resumed their scanning. He was coping. Barely. Nora watched from the reception desk, updating the visitor log while simultaneously calculating adoption metrics in her head. They'd placed 4 cats last weekend, 3 the week before. Good numbers. Sustainable numbers. Milo needed to be number 5. The red X grid loomed behind his enclosure like a scoreboard of failure. 17 cards. 17 families who'd tried and couldn't make it work. The new counter beside it, days remaining, 84, felt like a countdown to execution. Tom appeared at her elbow. "Couple just walked in. Empty nesters. They're asking about special needs cats." Nora's pulse quickened. "Show them Milo!" The Hendersons were exactly what the shelter prayed for. Late 60s, retired teachers, no other pets. Their previous cat, a blind diabetic named Otis, had lived to 19. They spoke in soft voices and moved with careful deliberation. When Tom introduced them to Milo, Mrs. Henderson's eyes immediately welled. "Oh, look at him," she whispered. "He's beautiful." Mr. Henderson knelt slowly, knees creaking. "We understand he's had some difficulty with placements." "He has," Nora admitted. "But every cat is different with every family. We've learned a lot about his needs since—" "We have experience," Mrs. Henderson said gently. "Otis taught us patience." They spent 20 minutes by Milo's enclosure. Didn't rush. Didn't reach through the bars immediately. Just sat together, voices low, letting him adjust to their presence. Milo tilted his head, ears angling toward them. Mrs. Henderson extended one finger through the mesh, moving slowly. "Hello, sweetheart." Milo's whiskers twitched. He stood, stretched, and took 2 steps forward. Rachel held her breath. One more step. Milo's nose was inches from Mrs. Henderson's finger. Then Mr. Henderson's phone rang. The sound was sharp, jarring, a default ringtone set too loud. It bounced off the tile floor, hit the window, echoed back with a slight reverb that made it sound like 2 phones ringing in overlapping intervals. Milo froze. His ears flattened completely. His body went rigid. Mr. Henderson fumbled for the phone, muttering apologies, but Milo had already pivoted. 3 precise steps backward, return to corner, tail wrapped, face to the wall. "I'm so sorry," Mr. Henderson said, silencing the call. "I should have—" "It's okay," Nora said, though her chest was tightening. "He just needs a minute to reset." They waited 10 minutes, then 20. Milo didn't move. Mrs. Henderson's voice was soft with regret. "He's not ready." "He might be," Rachel said quickly. "He's just— sounds are hard for him. In a quieter environment—" "Our house isn't quiet," Mr. Henderson said. "We have grandchildren visiting. The phone rings constantly. I don't think we can give him what he needs." They left an hour later with a senior tabby named Georgie, gentle and deaf and unbothered by noise. Nora added red X number 18 to the grid. The bachelor came at noon. David, mid-30s, software engineer, worked from home, lived alone, kept nocturnal hours. "I'm up all night anyway," he said. A cat who doesn't sleep normally would be perfect. He had good energy, calm, methodical, willing to read the entire behavioral packet before even approaching the enclosure. He asked smart questions about Milo's history, his triggers, his patterns. I can do scent trails, David said. I can keep a sound machine running. I've got a corner apartment, minimal echo, and I'm gone most of the day at the climbing gym, so he'd have quiet. It sounded perfect. Tom opened the enclosure to let David interact more directly. Milo was awake, alert, ears tracking David's approach. David sat cross-legged on the floor, not reaching out, just existing in Milo's space. "Hey, buddy," he said quietly. "I hear you're particular about your acoustics." Milo's whiskers twitched. David smiled. "I get it. I hate open-plan offices, too." He reached into his pocket, slowly telegraphing the movement, and pulled out a small bag of treats. Freeze-dried chicken. He set one on the floor between them. Milo's nose lifted. He took one step forward. Then David's smartwatch vibrated. The sound was tiny, barely audible to the humans. But Milo heard it. More importantly, he heard the pattern. 3 short bursts, a pause, 2 longer bursts. Morse code from a device that would be on David's wrist constantly, vibrating notifications every few minutes. Unpredictable intervals. Unpredictable rhythms. Milo's ears flattened. He retreated to his corner. David tried for another 30 minutes, disabled the watch, stayed perfectly still, whispered reassurances. Milo didn't move. "I think he knows I'm chaos," David said finally, standing up with a rueful smile. "I get notifications every 2 minutes. Slack, email, calendar reminders. My apartment basically runs on pings." He adopted a young orange tabby named Dash instead. Red X number 19. By 3 p.m., morale was fraying. Rachel dropped her clipboard in the supply closet. The clatter made 3 volunteers jump simultaneously. She picked it up with shaking hands. Sorry. Tom was in the break room, forehead pressed against the refrigerator. "We're failing him." "We're not failing him," Nora said, though she didn't believe it. "We're just learning." "Learning what? That he's impossible?" "That he's specific." Specific is code for broken. Nora's radio crackled. She ignored it. The bake sale flyers taped over the leaky window were starting to peel, curling in the humidity. Behind them, water stains bloomed like bruises. Everything in the building felt temporary, failing, held together by hope and duct tape. Her inbox was full of tight emails from the board liaison, subject lines that said things like capacity review and Q1 sustainability metrics. The subtext was always the same. We can't keep doing this. She deleted them without responding. The family of 4 arrived at 3:30. The Nguyen's, 2 parents, 2 daughters aged 8 and 11. They'd fostered dogs before, but never cats. The younger daughter, Mai, had been researching blind cat care for weeks. She brought a binder full of printed articles, highlighted and tabbed. "We know he's had trouble adjusting," Mrs. Nguyen said, "but we have a quiet house. My husband works from home. The girls are gentle." Mai knelt by the enclosure, binder clutched to her chest. "I read about clicker training. And scent mapping. I can do that." Milo was sleeping, curled in his usual spot. He woke when Mai's voice reached him, young, earnest, careful. "Hi, Milo," she whispered. "I'm Mai. I think you're really brave." Milo's ears swiveled toward her. Mai opened her binder. "I made a chart. For your routine. What time you eat, what time you play, what sounds you like. I can keep track." She was so sincere it hurt to watch. Mr. Nguyen pulled Nora aside. "We're serious about this. We've talked to our vet. We're prepared for the adjustment period." "It might be longer than you expect," Nora warned. "The last foster trial, we read the file. We know." They spent an hour with Milo. Mai read softly from her binder. Facts about blind cats, tips for enrichment, a list of quiet toys she'd already ordered. Milo listened, head tilted, as if the information itself was soothing. The older daughter, Lynn, sat beside her sister, voice equally soft. "We promise we'll be patient." It was going so well. Then Mai sneezed. Just once. A sudden, sharp sound in the quiet moment. But she was wearing synthetic floral perfume, something young and sweet, and drugstore cheap. The scent had been faint before. The sneeze aerosolized it. Milo's nose twitched, then wrinkled. He stood abruptly and moved to the far corner, as far from Mai as the enclosure allowed. Mrs. Nguyen noticed immediately. "Oh, is it the perfume?" "Maybe," Nora said. "Strong scents can be overwhelming for—" "I'll wash it off," Mai said, already standing. "I didn't think—" But Milo had already shut down, face to the wall, ears back, body language that said no in every possible way. They tried for another 20 minutes. But Milo didn't move. "We could come back," Mr. Nguyen offered. "Without the perfume. Give him another chance." Nora wanted to say yes, wanted to believe that one variable explained everything, but she'd seen this pattern 18 times before. The perfect family, the promising start, the single wrong frequency that unraveled it all. "I think Milo needs to choose his person," she said quietly, "and I don't think he's chosen yet." The Nguyen's left with a bonded pair of kittens. Red X number 20. By closing time, the shelter felt like a graveyard. Nora sat in her office, staring at the updated grid. 20 red X's. 3 new failures in a single day. The countdown clock had ticked down to 83. Her hands shook as she typed the weekly report. Adoption efforts ongoing. No successful placements for Milo this week. Continuing behavioral interventions and public outreach. It sounded clinical, professional. It felt like surrender. She walked to Milo's enclosure after the last volunteer had left. The building was finally quiet, just the hum of HVAC and the distant gurgle of water pipes. Milo was awake, sitting in his spot, ears scanning the empty room. "I don't know what you're waiting for," Nora whispered. "But we're running out of time." Milo didn't respond. His head tilted slightly, as if listening to something beyond the walls. Nora noticed his behavior had been shifting all day. Small things, the way he'd pause mid-step and angle his ears toward the hallway, toward nothing. The way he'd paw along the bars at precise intervals, counting something invisible. Footsteps that weren't there. Echoes of a life he remembered. She didn't understand it. But she recognized desperation when she saw it. The email arrived Monday morning. Regional Dog Adoption Fair. Saturday, Nov 6. Expected attendance. 200+ families will need front room space for kennels. Please confirm availability. Nora read it 3 times. Saturday, the busiest day of the month. The front room, Milo's current location, would be wall-to-wall chaos. Dogs barking, children screaming, sensory overload for 6 straight hours. She could move him, tuck him back in the quiet corridor, spare him the trauma. But the quiet corridor hadn't produced a single adoption in 23 months. The front room was visibility. It was last-ditch hope. Tom appeared in her doorway. "You saw the email?" "Yeah." "We moving him?" Nora stared at the countdown. 82 days remaining. "No," she said. "Leave him there." "Nora, if his person exists, they need to see him. 1 more weekend. That's all we've got." Tom didn't argue. He just nodded and walked away. Wednesday night, the weather changed. A winter front pushed down from Canada, dropping temperatures 15 degrees in 3 hours. The building's heating system kicked into overdrive. The ducts began to sing, a low, throaty hum that hadn't been there since last January. Nora was locking up when she noticed. Milo had gone completely still. Not sleeping, not resting, still. His body was rigid, ears locked forward, nose pressed to the mesh. He looked like a dog on point, every muscle taut with focus. "Milo?" He didn't respond. Didn't even twitch. Nora knelt beside the enclosure. "What is it, buddy? What do you hear?" Milo's whiskers trembled. His mouth opened slightly, as if tasting the air. The duct overhead rattled, a metallic groan as the furnace cycled through its warm-up sequence. And Milo's whole body shivered, not from fear, from recognition. He knew that sound. He was listening for something about to arrive, something coming home. The fair started at 10. By 10:15, the front room was a wall of noise. Families clustered around the dog kennels, retrievers and terriers and pit mixes wagging frantically, barking their pitches. Children pressed faces against glass, breath fogging the panes, sticky fingers tapping bars. Volunteers moved through the chaos with practiced calm, carrying clipboards and answering questions over the din. "Don't tap the cages, sweetie." "Yes, he's house-trained. That one's good with kids." Near the back wall, almost forgotten in the canine chaos, Milo sat in his corner. A volunteer passed by carrying a stack of adoption flyers. "Don't startle the blind one," she whispered to a co-worker. "He's already overwhelmed." Milo's ears were pinned halfway back, not in fear but in careful management, listening to everything, tracking the overlapping frequencies, calculating safe zones in the acoustic storm. His whiskers trembled with each new sound, a leash dragging across tile, a toddler's shriek, the pneumatic door opening every 40 seconds. He was coping, barely. Nora watched from the reception desk, one eye on the crowd, one eye on Milo. She'd moved his water bowl closer to his corner that morning, anticipating he wouldn't want to navigate during peak chaos. He hadn't touched it. The countdown clock behind her read 82 days. She tried not to look at it. Michael entered at 11:23. Winter light slanted through the door behind him, catching on his shoulders like an announcement. He stood in the entrance for a moment, hands deep in his coat pockets, eyes tracking the room with the unfocused gaze of someone who'd learned to look without seeing. He was early 30s, maybe, tall, lean, carrying the kind of careful stillness that came from grief that hadn't quite finished its work. His jacket was faded at the elbows, his boots worn but clean. There was something precise in the way he moved, economical, measured, like someone who'd gotten used to navigating small spaces. Rachel approached with her volunteer smile. "Hi, are you looking for anyone specific?" "A dog," Michael said. His voice was low, textured, with the hallway cadence of someone who'd spent years speaking softly in apartments with thin walls. "Just looking, seeing what's here. We've got some great ones today. Any size preference?" "Medium, maybe, I don't know. I've never—" He stopped himself. "I'm just looking." Rachel guided him toward the retriever mix in Kennel 3, a sweet-faced 2-year-old named Murphy, who'd been returned once for excessive energy. Michael knelt slowly, knees creaking, and extended one hand toward the mesh. Murphy bounded over, tail helicopter spinning. "Hey, buddy," Michael said quietly. As he leaned forward, something shifted in the room's chemistry. Scent diffused. Cologne, faint but distinct. Sandalwood base notes, amber middle, something warm and resinous that didn't announce itself, but settled into the air like memory. It drifted across the tile, past the stroller traffic, through the bars of Kennel 17. Milo's head snapped up. His ears locked forward so fast, Rachel noticed from 15 feet away. Milo stood in one fluid motion. No hesitation, no careful calculation. He moved to the front of his enclosure with a directness he'd never shown, nose pressed between the bars, nostrils flaring. His whole body was vibrating. Tom was restocking food bowls in the corner. He froze mid-scoop. "Nora!" She was already moving. Milo's paw threaded through the mesh, reaching toward nothing, or toward something only he could sense. His mouth opened, and he made a sound that stopped every conversation within 10 feet. Not a meow, not a cry, a summons. Clear, urgent, unmistakable. The vocalization of a creature who had just recognized the only frequency that mattered. The clipboard in Rachel's hand clattered to the floor. Michael's head turned. He looked across the room, past the families, past the barking dogs, past the chaos, directly at the blind cat, who couldn't possibly be looking back. Their eyes met, or would have, if Milo could see. "Is he?" Michael's voice cracked. "Is he calling me?" Nora's throat tightened. "He's never done that." "Never?" "Not once. Not in 23 months." Michael stood slowly, like someone in a dream who wasn't sure they wanted to wake up. Murphy barked behind him, confused at the sudden abandonment. Michael didn't seem to hear it. He crossed the room in 6 steps. Milo tracked every footfall. His ears swiveled, locked, focused. His paw extended farther through the mesh, straining. Michael stopped 3 feet from the enclosure. They stared at each other, man and blind cat, across a distance that felt infinite and microscopic at once. "Hi," Michael whispered. Milo's vocalization deepened into something that sounded like a word being shaped by a throat that couldn't speak. Nora's hands shook as she reached for the latch. "Can I?" "Yes," Nora said. "Yes, open it." The door swung wide like a story that couldn't be rewritten. For 23 months, Milo had lived behind bars. For 23 months, every opened door had led to chaos, carrier trips, unfamiliar homes, acoustic nightmares he couldn't map. Every threshold had been a betrayal. This one wasn't. Milo stepped out without hesitation. No careful paw placement, no whisker scanning for obstacles, no 3-step pause-pivot protocol. He walked straight to Michael and pressed his face into the man's palm with the certainty of someone coming home. Michael's breath caught. His hand cupped Milo's head, gentle, instinctive, like muscle memory from a life he'd been living in parallel. His thumb stroked behind Milo's ear, hitting the exact spot that made the blind cat's purr detonate like thunder. The shelter went silent. Volunteers stopped mid-sentence. Families turned to stare. Even the dogs quieted, sensing something unprecedented unfolding. Michael sank to his knees and Milo climbed into his lap. The man's other hand found Milo's spine, tracing the stripes with fingers that shook. I don't understand." Milo's purr was so loud Nora could feel it in her sternum from 6 feet away. Michael bent forward until his forehead touched Milo's head. His shoulders started shaking. He was crying. "I'm sorry," he whispered into Milo's fur. "I'm so sorry I came for a dog." Milo pushed harder into his chest, kneading with claws that didn't quite retract, purring like an engine that had finally found its ignition. Nora knelt beside them. "How long have you been looking?" Michael didn't lift his head. "I wasn't. I told myself I wasn't ready, but I—" His voice broke. "I needed something to fill the space." "What space?" He finally looked up, eyes red. "My apartment burned down 2 years ago. Harborview Complex. I lost everything." Nora's breath stopped. Harborview. The word on Milo's intake sheet. The single notation from the mobile disaster clinic. "There was a cat," Michael said. "I tried to find him after. Checked every shelter, every rescue, every clinic within 50 miles. Posted flyers. Searched online databases. He just vanished. They told me he probably didn't make it." He stroked Milo's face with trembling fingers. "But I kept his food bowl, just in case. For 2 years, I kept it." Milo's whiskers brushed Michael's wrist. The scent exchange happening between them was visible in Milo's body language. Every muscle softening. Every defensive posture melting. He was breathing Michael in like oxygen after drowning. Tom's voice was barely a whisper. "That's why he wouldn't go home with anyone." "He was already home," Rachel said, tears streaming. "He's been waiting." Nora wanted to believe it. Wanted to believe in the impossible poetry of a blind cat who'd waited 23 months for the exact frequency of one man's footsteps, the exact chemistry of his skin, the exact timbre of his voice in a hallway that no longer existed. But she had paperwork to consider. Protocols. 20 failed adoptions that proved Milo couldn't adjust to homes. "Michael," she said gently, "I need you to understand. Milo is special needs. He's had 17 failed placements. He doesn't adapt to new environments. What's your apartment like?" Tom interrupted. Michael blinked. "What? Layout? Acoustics? What's it like?" It's the same complex. They rebuilt it. Same floor plan, same unit number. I moved back in 6 months ago." He looked down at Milo. "I thought it would help me move on, but it just feels empty." "Same HVAC system?" Tom pressed. "Yeah, same building codes. Same ductwork configuration?" I guess." Nora's chest opened like a door. The ducts, the building's song, the frequencies Milo had been listening for. Michael lived in the rebuilt echo of the home Milo remembered. "He's not refusing homes," she whispered. "He's refusing the wrong home." Michael's hands stilled on Milo's fur. "I don't know how to care for a blind cat. I came here for a dog. Something simple. Something that wouldn't—" He stopped, voice cracking. "Something that wouldn't remind me." Milo climbed higher on his chest, face pressed against Michael's throat, purring into the pulse point. Nora crouched until she was eye level with them both. "Maybe," she said quietly, "he came for you." The paperwork took 30 minutes. Michael signed in a daze, hand shaking so badly the signatures barely resembled letters. Nora walked him through the behavioral notes, the failed placements, the clicker protocols, and scent mapping strategies. "He knows your home already," she explained. "The soundscape, the layout. That's why he couldn't adjust anywhere else. He was waiting for this specific acoustic signature." Michael stared at Milo, who sat beside him on the counter, nose tilted toward Michael's breath. "I thought I was going crazy," Michael admitted. "I'd hear phantom footsteps, little sounds in the night. I thought it was grief. But what if—" He swallowed hard. "What if I was hearing him? The version of him that was supposed to be there." Rachel took their photo. No flash, just soft afternoon light through the window. Michael and Milo, forehead to forehead, both of them looking like survivors of the same shipwreck finally finding shore. The red X tally on the wall stayed at 20. Nora's hand hovered over the marker, but she couldn't bring herself to add the final count. Not yet. Not until she knew this wasn't just another beautiful beginning that would collapse into return number 21. The carrier door closed at 12:47. Milo didn't protest, didn't stiffen. He settled into the blanket, Michael's blanket, carried from home specifically for this, and his ears pivoted toward the sound of Michael's breathing just beyond the mesh door. They walked to the parking lot together, Michael carrying the crate with both hands, moving carefully over ice patches. When he opened the car door, winter air hit the sandalwood cologne still clinging to his jacket. The scent diffused into the carrier. Milo's entire body relaxed. His purr softened from thunder into something deeper. Contentment so profound it didn't need volume. Nora stood in the shelter doorway, watching Michael's car pull away. Tom appeared beside her, arms crossed against the cold. "Think it'll stick?" he asked. Nora didn't answer immediately. She watched the taillights disappear around the corner, taking with them a blind cat who'd refused 20 families and chosen one man with the patience of someone who understood that home wasn't a place. It was a frequency. "Yeah," she said finally. "I think it will." The countdown clock behind them still read 82 days, but for the first time in 23 months, it felt like a number that didn't matter. The carrier door opened at 1:47 p.m. Milo didn't rush out. He sat in the doorway for 30 seconds, nose lifted, ears swiveling in slow arcs, cataloging the space in frequencies Michael couldn't hear. The radiator's metallic tick, the refrigerator's low hum cycling through its compressor. The specific resonance of traffic filtering through double-pane windows, muted, distant, nothing like the shelter's glass that rattled with every passing bus. And underneath it all, the ducts, that low, familiar song, the thermal expansion groan that meant home in a language older than words. Michael knelt 3 feet back, giving him space. "Take your time, buddy." Milo's whiskers twitched. Then he stepped out. The apartment was small, 850 square feet, configured in the builder's standard one-bedroom layout. Galley kitchen opening to a living room with beige carpet and cream walls. A short hallway to the bathroom and bedroom. Generic, forgettable, identical to 40 other units in the complex. But the bones were right. Milo moved to the nearest wall and pressed his shoulder against it. Starting his perimeter walk with the methodical precision of a surveyor. His whiskers brushed the baseboard. His paws counted intervals. 3 steps to the corner, pivot, 4 steps to the next corner, pivot. Michael watched, barely breathing. Milo traced the entire living room without hesitation. Paused at the kitchen threshold where linoleum met carpet, a tactile boundary that clicked softly under paw pressure. His nose lifted, catching the scent of dish soap and the faint mineral tang of tap water. He continued, baseboards to sofa, sofa to coffee table, which he navigated around with a single whisker-touch adjustment. Coffee table to entertainment center. Entertainment center to hallway. At the hallway entrance, he stopped, his head tilted, ears angling toward the bedroom. There, almost inaudible, the soft wheeze of a humidifier Michael had left running out of habit, moisture to combat the dry winter heat. Milo's tail lifted. He walked down the hallway like he'd done it 1,000 times before. Michael followed at a distance, throat tight. The bedroom was small, dominated by a queen mattress on a basic frame. Bookshelf against the far wall, dresser with 3 drawers that didn't quite close. And in the corner, beneath the window, a braided rug, positioned directly over the floor vent. Milo stepped onto the rug. The vent exhaled, warm air, pushing through the grate with a soft sigh that ruffled his fur. He sat down, his eyes half closed. His purr started low and built until it filled the small room like a second heartbeat. Michael's knees went weak. He sat on the edge of the bed, hands shaking. "You remember," he whispered. Milo's ears swiveled toward his voice, but didn't leave the vent. This spot. This exact thermal signature. The place where a cat could sleep in winter and feel the building's warmth rising through his belly. He'd been here before, or a version of him had, in a version of this room that had burned and been rebuilt down to the stud. Michael pressed his palms against his eyes. The first bowls were a disaster. Michael set them in the kitchen, sensible, out of traffic, near the water line in case of spills. He filled one with kibble, one with fresh water, and stepped back. Milo approached from the living room, whiskers sweeping. He found the carpet to linoleum threshold, paused, adjusted trajectory. Then walked directly past the bowls. His shoulder clipped the water dish. It rocked, but didn't spill. Milo's ears flattened in confusion. He stopped, reversed course, tried again from a different angle. Same result. He passed within inches, but couldn't locate them by scent or sound alone. Michael's chest tightened with panic. Okay, we need... He looked around desperately. The shelter had given him instructions, consistent placement, landmarks, sensory cues. His eyes landed on the tile seam. The kitchen floor was cheap linoleum designed to look like tile, complete with embossed grout lines. One seam ran perpendicular to the counter, creating a faint ridge you could feel underfoot. When you stepped on it, it clicked, a tiny plastic flex that made a sound. Michael moved the bowls until they were positioned exactly at that seam. He knelt and tapped the floor 3 times. Click, click, click. Milo's head turned. Michael tapped again, then scraped his fingernail along the seam's ridge, creating a subtle rasp. Milo approached, found the seam, followed it with one paw until his whiskers brushed ceramic. He ate. Michael sagged against the cabinet exhaling relief. The seam became Milo's landmark. Within 3 days, he could navigate from any room directly to his bowls without hesitation. The click of the tile edge meant food and water with the certainty of liturgy. Small victories. Michael catalogued each one in his head like evidence that he wasn't failing. The apartment was full of ghosts. Not Milo's, Michael's. Sealed boxes from his sister sat in the bedroom closet, unopened for 2 years. Just clothes, she'd written on the side in Sharpie. Nothing important, but Michael couldn't bring himself to look. The idea of sorting through the salvaged fragments of his former life felt like archaeology of a person who'd stopped existing. He hummed unconsciously while cooking, a mangled tune he didn't recognize until the third night when he realized it was the song that had been playing when the fire alarm went off. Some pop melody from the radio he'd left on for the cat he thought was dead. The cat who was now asleep on the vent, alive and safe and here. He kept the lights low. Not out of necessity. Milo didn't need darkness or light, couldn't perceive the difference. But Michael found himself dimming switches anyway, pulling curtains, creating a muted world that felt like it matched what Milo experienced. "I'm trying to see it your way," he whispered to the sleeping cat one evening. Milo's ear flicked, but didn't wake. Michael sat on the floor beside the vent, back against the wall, watching the rise and fall of Milo's breath. The apartment was quieter than he remembered, or maybe he'd just forgotten what quiet felt like. After the fire, he'd lived with his sister for 6 months in her house full of children and chaos. Then a sublet with paper-thin walls and neighbors who fought at 3 a.m. By the time he moved back here, silence felt alien. But Milo needed it. So Michael learned to move softly, learned to close cabinets without slamming, learned to shuffle his feet so the shoe tap gave advance warning, left foot slightly louder than right, a cadence Milo could track from 2 rooms away. Within a week, Milo would lift his head when Michael entered a room, ears angling toward the distinctive shuffle-tap-shuffle rhythm, not following sight lines, following sound, following him. The first night together, Michael didn't sleep. He lay on his back, staring at ceiling shadows cast by streetlights through half-closed blinds, listening to Milo's breathing from the vent across the room. At 2 a.m., the bed shifted. Soft weight landed near his ankle. Milo's purr started immediately. Not loud, but steady, a frequency Michael could feel through the mattress. The cat climbed slowly up the length of his body, paused at his hip, tested the terrain of his ribs, finally settled in the hollow of Michael's chest, directly over his sternum, nose tucked against the base of his throat. Michael's hand found Milo's spine. The purr intensified. Outside, winter quiet settled over the building, the specific 2 a.m. stillness that kept the windows from rattling, when even the traffic thinned to nothing and the world felt suspended. Michael's chest ached. Not with grief exactly, not with relief either. Something between them. The mourning of 2 years spent believing in permanent loss, colliding with the impossible fact of warm fur and heartbeat, and aliveness breathing against his pulse. "I thought you were gone," he whispered. Milo's whiskers tickled his collarbone. "I thought I'd lost everything." The purr didn't waver. Michael's breath hitched, then broke, then became something that might have been crying if he'd let it finish. But he swallowed it back and just held on. The cat who'd waited 23 months. The man who'd grieved for 2 years. Both of them finally home. Routines calcified into ritual. Litter box in the bathroom, positioned on a textured mat that announced here through paw friction. Milo learned it in 2 days, never missing, never searching. Scent anchors placed consistently. Michael's worn shirt draped over the back of the desk chair. A specific lavender soap in the bathroom that Milo could smell from the hallway. Coffee grounds in the kitchen trash, bitter and distinct, marking territory. Clicker training for meals. 3 clicks meant food was coming. 2 clicks meant Michael was leaving the room. 1 click meant, "I'm here. You're safe." Milo learned them all. He learned the creak of the refrigerator door meant Michael was awake. The sound of running water meant morning. The specific shuffle before the front door opened meant temporary absence, but not abandonment. He learned to wait by the door when Michael left for work. Ears tracking footsteps in the hallway until they faded. Learned to be waiting in the same spot when the footsteps returned. The shuffle-tap-shuffle that meant your person is home. Small domesticities that felt like miracles. Michael documented everything in a notebook he kept by the bed. Day 4. Milo found the bedroom without prompting. Day 7. Responded to name from 2 rooms away. Day 10. Climbed onto lap during dinner. Purr audible from kitchen. Evidence against the fear that this was temporary. That the shelter would call and say it was a mistake. That Milo would wake up one morning and realize this wasn't the home he'd been waiting for. But 2 weeks passed. Then 3. Milo's weight increased. Half a pound, then a pound. His coat began to shine. The tension in his shoulders, permanent for 23 months, started to soften. He stopped sleeping with his face to the wall. Started sleeping in sunbeams that he couldn't see but could feel warming his fur. Started sleeping with his belly exposed, paws stretched above his head, throat vulnerable. Trust, written in the language of a body that had finally stopped bracing for disaster. On day 17, Michael booked a vet appointment. Routine checkup, microchip registration, basic blood work to establish a health baseline. He made the call during lunch break, phone pressed between shoulder and ear, while he stirred pasta that would be dinner for the next 3 days. "Any specific concerns?" the receptionist asked. Michael looked at Milo, asleep in his spot on the vent, completely relaxed. "No," he said. I want to make sure I'm doing it right. I want to make sure I know what I don't know." The appointment was set for Friday at 3 p.m. Michael hung up and immediately started worrying. What if the vet said Milo needed specialized care Michael couldn't afford? What if there were medical issues the shelter hadn't disclosed? What if— Milo chirped from the bedroom, not distressed, just checking in. "Where are you?" "I heard your voice stop." Michael walked to the doorway. "I'm here, buddy." Milo's ears swiveled toward him, his tail curled in acknowledgement. He didn't get up, didn't need visual confirmation, just needed the voice. Michael leaned against the doorframe, watching the blind cat, who trusted him completely. "We've got this," he whispered. Milo's purr answered, soft, steady, certain. Outside, winter afternoon light slanted through the window, catching dust motes in geometric patterns. The radiator ticked. The refrigerator hummed. The building sang its low song through vents that had outlasted fire and reconstruction and 2 years of grief. Everything was exactly where it needed to be. For now. The clinic smelled like antiseptic and lavender. Not the sharp chemical burn of a hospital, something gentler. Diffused oil, maybe, or sachets tucked behind the reception desk. The waiting room was small but deliberate. Warm lamps instead of fluorescents, soft towels folded on benches. A white noise machine humming in the corner to mask the anxiety of dogs in back rooms. Michael sat with the carrier on his lap, fingers pressed against the mesh door. Inside, Milo was motionless. Not frozen, just conserving energy, ears tracking the unfamiliar soundscape with careful precision. A phone ringing 2 rooms away. The pneumatic hiss of an automatic door. A technician's footsteps on linoleum that echoed differently than Michael's apartment tile. "You're okay," Michael whispered. "Just a checkup." Milo's whiskers twitched acknowledgement. The door to the exam room opened. A woman in her 40s appeared. Dr. Reyes, according to the embroidered name on her white coat. She had steady hands and a low voice that didn't try too hard to be soothing. "Michael, come on back." The exam table was padded with a quilted mat that muffled sound. Dr. Reyes let Milo exit the carrier on his own terms, not reaching, not rushing. She knelt to his level, extending one hand palm down so he could investigate her scent. Milo's nose lifted. Catalogued, latex gloves, hand soap. The faint musk of the German shepherd who'd been examined an hour ago. He stepped forward cautiously. "Look at those whiskers," Dr. Reyes said quietly. "Absolute antennas." Michael's chest loosened slightly. He uses them like radar. Most blind cats do, but his are exceptional. See how they're slightly thicker at the base? And the way they're positioned, wider spread than standard. He's adapted. Her hands moved over Milo's body with practiced efficiency, checking teeth, palpating lymph nodes, listening to heart and lungs. Milo tolerated it. Didn't purr, but didn't resist. "He's in good shape," Dr. Reyes said. "Weight's healthy. Coat condition is excellent. How long have you had him? 3 weeks? And before that? The shelter." "Almost 2 years." Dr. Reyes's eyebrows lifted. "That's a long stay." "Special needs placements?" 17 failed attempts. She paused mid-examination. 17. He wouldn't settle? Kept getting returned. Michael's voice tightened. "I was worried I'd be number 18. "But you're not." "No, he—" Michael stopped, not sure how to explain it. "He chose me." Dr. Reyes studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Let's scan his chip. Make sure the registration transferred correctly." She retrieved a small handheld scanner from the counter. White plastic, shaped like a price gun. She ran it over Milo's shoulders, between his shoulder blades, searching for the rice grain implant. The device chirped. Numbers populated the small screen. 9810200128. Dr. Reyes frowned. "What?" Michael's pulse spiked. "Is it wrong?" "Not wrong, just—" She moved to the computer, typed the number into the registry database. "Old data. This chip was registered to a mobile clinic, not a permanent shelter." The screen loaded. Dr. Reyes went very still. "What?" Michael stood. "What is it?" She turned the monitor so he could see. "Microchip number 98102001287. Intake. Date December 18th, 2023. Location Harborview Apartments. Fire Mobile Disaster Response Clinic. Species feline, DSH, brown tabby, approx. 2 years. Medical notes. Smoke inhalation, mild. Corneal scarring, severe, bilateral. Vision lost, responsive to auditory cues. Behavioral notes, extreme stress. Calms with low, steady humming. Responds to amber sandalwood scent profiles. Likely resident of Unit 4C. Rescuer, deceased in stairwell. Soothes when neighbor from 4D speaks in hallway tone. Temp Foster. Church Gymnasium, 72 hours. Transfer to Metro Animal Services pending. Below the typed report, a handwritten note in blue pen. This boy is looking for something specific. He won't settle until he finds it. Please, don't give up on him. Michael's vision blurred. His hands gripped the edge of the counter. 4D, he whispered. Dr. Reyes looked up. Sorry? Unit 4D, that was... His voice cracked. That was my sister's apartment. I was staying there. The fire, I was there. The room tilted slightly. Dr. Reyes's hand found his elbow, steadying. Sit down. Michael sat. Or fell. He wasn't sure which. His mind was cascading through memories like shuffling cards. The night of the fire. December 18th. He'd been at his sister's for the holidays, sleeping on her couch because his own apartment, 4C, directly next door, was being fumigated. The smoke alarm at 2 a.m., his sister screaming for the kids. The hallway full of neighbors, everyone stumbling toward stairs that had already vanished in smoke. Someone shouting about a cat. A man from 4C, the quiet guy who worked nights, who Michael had only met once, trying to go back for his cat. Security grabbing him, dragging him toward the exit. Michael hadn't seen what happened next. He'd been carrying his nephew down 6 flights of stairs. The man from 4C didn't make it out. The rescuer, Michael said. The one who died. That was Milo's person. Dr. Reyes nodded slowly. And Michael's breath came in sharp bursts. I was living next door. My sister gave everyone on the floor these holiday gift sets. Cheap colognes from the drugstore. Amber and sandalwood. 3 bottles per set. I've been wearing it for 2 years because it was the only thing I salvaged. His hand went to his collar, where the scent still clung faintly. I smell like his home, he whispered. Dr. Reyes pulled up a stool, sitting across from him. Her voice stayed level, clinical, but gentle. Blind animals anchor themselves differently than sighted ones. They build maps from sound, scent, vibration, texture. When those anchors align, the world makes sense. When they don't, even slightly, the world becomes hostile. She gestured to the notes on screen. Milo's map was etched into him by his original home, the hallway acoustics, the ductwork song, the scent profile of the people on his floor, the specific cadence of footsteps on that particular carpet. Michael's throat closed. When shelters tried to place him in new homes, those homes had different sounds, different smells, different vibrations. To you or me, they'd seem fine, better even, quieter, safer. But to Milo, they were wrong, fundamentally, sensorially wrong, like being asked to live in a room where gravity pulled sideways. She pulled up Milo's behavioral file from the shelter, the 20 failed placements, each one documented with meticulous notes. Refused to eat. Would not leave corner. Showed signs of extreme distress when exposed to lavender air freshener. Startled by phone echo. Would not approach adopter after acoustic trigger. Shut down completely when exposed to synthetic floral scent. Every failure had a reason. Every return was Milo rejecting a sensory map that didn't match the one burned into his memory. He wasn't refusing people, Dr. Reyes said quietly. He was refusing everything that wasn't home. Michael looked at Milo. The blind cat sat on the exam table, head tilted toward Michael's voice, whiskers flicking in small, metronomic movements, measuring air currents, tracking breath, anchoring himself to the one frequency that matched. But my apartment, Michael said, it's not the same building. It burned down. They rebuilt it. Same floor plan? Yes. Same HVAC configuration? Yes. Same hallway dimensions? Same tile adhesive in the kitchen? Same window placement? Michael nodded slowly. Then it's the same map, Dr. Reyes said. The blueprint is identical. And you, she gestured to him, you carry the scent profile, the vocal cadence. You move through that space the way his person's neighbor moved, close enough to familiar that his anchors align. She pulled up the handwritten note again. Soothes when neighbor from 4D speaks in hallway tone. You were 4D, she said. My sister was 4D, but you stayed there for months after the fire. You absorbed the acoustic signature, the way sound moves in those hallways, the specific rhythm of footsteps on that carpet. She paused. Do you shuffle your left foot? Michael blinked. What? When you walk, do you shuffle slightly with your left foot? I tore my ACL in college. It never healed right. I compensate. Shuffle, tap, shuffle, Dr. Reyes said. That's what Milo hears. That's what he's been listening for. Michael's vision blurred again. 23 months. Milo had spent 23 months in a shelter, rejecting every home, waiting for the exact frequency of a shuffle-tap-shuffle footfall, and sandalwood cologne, and the thermal song of one specific HVAC system, waiting for a ghost. And Michael had walked in wearing that ghost's scent, carrying that ghost's cadence, living in that ghost's rebuilt apartment. He thought I was coming home, Michael whispered. No, Dr. Reyes said gently. He thought he was coming home. The walk back to the car felt like moving through water. Michael carried the carrier with both hands, moving carefully over patches of ice that the afternoon sun hadn't reached. Winter air bit at his face, sharp and clean, but he barely felt it. Inside the carrier, Milo was alert, ears swiveling, tracking the sounds of the parking lot. A car door closing, footsteps on asphalt. The distant beep of a truck backing up. Michael stopped beside his car but didn't open the door. He set the carrier on the hood and crouched until his face was level with the mesh. "I didn't know," he said. "I didn't know you were waiting." Milo's nose pressed against the mesh. "I thought you were gone. I thought everyone from that night was—" His voice broke. Milo's paw extended through the bars, reaching. Michael's finger met it, warm pad against cold skin. "Your person didn't make it," he whispered. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry he didn't make it." Milo's whiskers trembled. "But I'm here, and I've got the same, I don't know, the same shape as home. I know it's not the same. I know I'm not—" Milo chirped, soft, clear, definitive. Not distress, not question, confirmation. Michael's breath shuddered out. He sat down on the curb, carrier beside him, and just breathed. Let the winter air fill his lungs. Let the weight of 2 years' grief and 3 weeks' confusion settle into something that almost felt like understanding. Inside the carrier, Milo moved. Subtle shift. Adjustment of weight. The small recalibration of a compass needle settling toward true north. He wasn't searching anymore. Wasn't listening for footsteps that would never come. He'd found the frequency close enough to home. And he was staying. Then, Unit 4C, November 2023. The woman in 4C opened her door to strays. Not officially. The building had a no-pets clause that everyone ignored and management pretended not to notice. But Elena was the one who left bowls in the hallway, kibble for the orange Tom who lived in the parking garage, water for the calico who sunbathed on the fire escape. She hummed while she worked. Low, tuneless melodies that drifted through thin walls into neighboring apartments. The kind of unconscious sound that became part of the building's ambient texture, like radiator clicks and distant traffic. Milo had appeared in October, thin and skittish, with eyes already clouding from untreated infection. Elena found him huddled by the trash chute, shivering. She didn't hesitate, carried him inside, set up a cardboard box lined with her softest sweater, made a vet appointment she couldn't afford and paid for it anyway. The vet said the blindness was permanent, scarring too deep. But the cat was young, adaptable. "He'll compensate," she said. "Give him time." Elena gave him everything. She rearranged her apartment around his needs, furniture pushed to walls, creating clear pathways. She wore the same drugstore cologne every day. Amber and sandalwood, $8.99 for 3 bottles, a holiday gift from the neighbor in 4D who'd given identical sets to everyone on the floor. She hummed while cooking, while folding laundry. While sitting at her desk, grading papers, she taught ESL at the community college, came home exhausted, but always found energy to hum. Milo learned her patterns, the shuffle of her slippers on the carpet, slightly heavier on the left side where she favored an old knee injury, the specific creak of the refrigerator door, the thermal song of the building's ducts in winter, singing their low whale call through vents that lined up perfectly with his favorite sleeping spot. He mapped the world through her rhythms, and when she hummed, he purred. Then, Church Gymnasium, December 19th, 2023. The gymnasium smelled like smoke and disinfectant. 73 people displaced. 12 animals recovered. The Red Cross had set up cots in neat rows, while the mobile disaster clinic worked out of folding tables near the basketball hoops. Milo sat in a carrier labeled 4C, brown tabby, blind, owner deceased. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, a flat mechanical drone, nothing like the ductwork song. The acoustics were wrong, too much echo, sounds bouncing off gymnasium walls with sharp reverb. He pressed himself into the corner of the carrier, face to the mesh, and didn't move. A veterinary technician named Sarah crouched beside him. She'd been volunteering for 18 hours straight, working through the surge of displaced animals with methodical exhaustion. "Hey, buddy," she said softly. Milo didn't respond. Sarah opened the carrier door, extended one hand, palm down, letting him investigate her scent. He flinched back. Wrong. All wrong. The hand soap was lavender, synthetic, sharp. The gloves were latex. The person smelled like stress sweat, and the German Shepherd 3 carriers down. Nothing matched. Sarah tried again, spoke in her gentlest voice, offered treats. Milo turned his face to the wall. She made notes on his intake form. Extreme stress, non-responsive to standard comfort measures. Another tech passed by, older, gray-haired, humming under her breath while she refilled water bowls. The tune was formless, automatic, the kind of sound people made when they'd forgotten anyone was listening. Milo's ears swiveled. His body shifted slightly toward the sound. Sarah noticed. "Wait, do that again." "Do what?" "The humming." The older tech hummed louder, leaning toward Milo's carrier. His whiskers twitched. His shoulders lowered fractionally. Sarah added to the notes, "Calms with low, steady humming." Over the next 72 hours, the mobile team documented everything. Responds to amber sandalwood scent profiles, tested with donated cologne samples from the Red Cross supply. Soothes when specific neighbor from 4D speaks in hallway tone. A woman named Maria, who'd survived the fire, had been checking on displaced pets. When she spoke near Milo's carrier, he emerged briefly, strong auditory mapping. Appears to be searching for specific acoustic signature. At the bottom of his file, Sarah wrote in blue pen, "This boy is looking for something specific. He won't settle until he finds it. Please, don't give up on him." 3 days later, Milo was transferred to Metro Animal Services. The search began. Then, Unit 4D, December 2023. Michael's sister hummed off-key. Always had. Their mother used to joke that Maria got the organizational skills and Michael got the musical ear, and never the twain shall meet. She hummed while making peppermint tea, her ritual every night before bed, kettle whistling, mug clinking against the counter. She hummed while helping her kids with homework, while folding the laundry that never seemed to end. Michael stayed on her couch for 3 months after the fire. His apartment, 4C, right next door, had been ground zero for the electrical failure that started it all. Everything he owned was ash. His neighbor Elena, the quiet woman who'd always smiled politely in the hallway, had died in the stairwell trying to save her cat. The guilt was crushing. He'd been 20 feet away. Could have helped. Should have noticed something sooner. But he'd been asleep on Maria's couch, having crashed there after a late shift, and by the time the alarm woke him, the hallway was already impassable. Maria tried to help him process, made him peppermint tea, let him sit in silence for hours, didn't push. The building was condemned, then demolished, then rebuilt. Same blueprints, same developer, same cheap HVAC system because the insurance payout barely covered code compliance. When the new units opened, Maria moved back to 4D. Michael moved back to 4C. He told himself it was closure, told himself living in the rebuilt ghost of his old apartment would help him move on. It didn't. It just felt empty. He wore the cologne from the holiday gift set Maria had given him 2 Christmases ago, one of the few things that had survived, tucked in his gym bag. Amber and sandalwood, cheap and cloying, but it reminded him of a time before the fire, before everything ended. He walked with a shuffle-tap-shuffle cadence, left foot dragging slightly from the ACL injury he'd never properly rehabbed. He hummed unconsciously. The same tune Maria hummed. Off-key, mangled, the melody of grief that didn't know it was singing. And the ducts sang their winter song through vents that lined up exactly where they'd been before. The hallway remembered, even if Michael didn't realize what it was remembering. Now, Michael's apartment, March 2025. Michael read the mobile clinic notes for the 7th time. He'd requested the full file from Dr. Reyes. Every page, every annotation, every scrap of information the disaster team had documented. It sat on his coffee table now, edges worn from repeated handling. Calms with low, steady humming. He looked at Milo, asleep on the vent, and something clicked. The mangled tune he hummed while cooking. The one he didn't realize he was doing until Milo's purr intensified. It was Maria's tune, the same formless melody she'd hummed in 4D for years, the same melody that had probably drifted through the walls into 4C, where Elena hummed her own version while caring for a blind cat who was learning to map the world through sound. The hallway had held it, passed it between apartments like a secret, and Michael had inherited it without knowing. He started humming deliberately after that, not loudly, just a low, steady background frequency while he moved through the apartment, while he cooked, while he worked at his laptop. A constant auditory anchor that said, "I'm here, you're safe, the world is consistent." Milo's response was immediate. His navigation became more confident. He'd walk from bedroom to kitchen without whisker-checking corners, trusting the soundscape to guide him. The humming became a beacon. When Michael was in one room, Milo could track his location 2 rooms away. Michael added other anchors based on the clinic notes. A sandalwood sachet tucked beside the vent in Milo's favorite spot. Not the cologne, too strong, but a subtle background scent that layered into the apartment's chemistry. A playlist of low ambient sounds, not music, just textures. Distant rain, soft static, the kind of white noise that filled acoustic space without demanding attention. Voice cues as navigation beacons. 3 clicks still meant food. 2 clicks meant I'm leaving the room. 1 click meant I'm here. But he added a new one, a soft whistle. 2 notes, rising, that meant, come find me. Within a week, Milo would follow the whistle from any room. His behaviors stabilized completely. No more night frenzies, the 2 a.m. wall pacing that the shelter had documented. No more refusal to eat. No more shutdowns when unexpected sounds occurred. He navigated the apartment with the confidence of someone who'd lived there for years. Because, in a sense, he had. The blueprint was the same. The thermal signature matched. The acoustic footprint aligned. And Michael carried the frequency of home in his shuffle-tap-shuffle footfall, his unconscious humming, his sandalwood skin. Milo wasn't adapting to a new home. He was settling back into the shape of the old one. Michael wrote the letter on a Sunday afternoon. Dear Nora, I wanted to update you on Milo. He's doing well, better than well. He's thriving, Dr. Reyes helped me understand why the other placements failed. It wasn't behavioral. It was sensory. Milo was waiting for a very specific combination of sound, scent, and spatial configuration. He was waiting for home. I didn't know I was carrying it. The shelter notes said he was impossible. But he wasn't impossible. He was just looking for something everyone else thought was gone. I think about the woman who had him before the fire, Elena. I never really knew her, just polite hallway smiles. But she saved him. She gave him a map of the world that was strong enough to survive 2 years of searching. I'm trying to honor that. To be the home he's been waiting for, even though I'm not the person he lost. Thank you for not giving up on him. Thank you for keeping the door open long enough for us to find each other. I've attached a photo. He's asleep on the vent. He looks peaceful. Michael. He printed the letter, tucked it in an envelope with the photo, and mailed it the next morning. That night, he Googled Harborview Fire Memorial. There was one. A small plaque in the rebuilt building's lobby listing the 7 people who hadn't made it out. Elena's name was 4th from the top. He thought about visiting, standing in the hallway where she'd hummed and put out bowls for strays, saying something. He didn't know what. Thank you seemed inadequate. I'm sorry felt worse. Maybe he'd just stand there. Let the hallway remember for him. The quiet scene came a week later. Michael was cooking pasta, the same cheap box he'd been cycling through since college. The kitchen smelled like garlic and butter. Outside, March rain tapped against the window with irregular rhythm. He hummed without thinking. The mangled tune, Maria's tune, Elena's tune, passed through walls and years and fire. Milo was asleep on the vent, but his paws twitched. Not the frantic scramble of nightmares. The shelter staff had documented those. The desperate running, the phantom escape from smoke and chaos. This was different. Soft movements, relaxed. His paws flexed and released in slow rhythm, as if he was walking through rooms that existed somewhere between memory and present. Rooms that held. Rooms that were safe. Rooms where someone hummed low and steady, and the ducks sang their winter song, and the world made sense in frequencies too subtle for human ears, but perfect for a blind cat who'd been waiting 23 months to come home. Michael watched him sleep. Rain drummed, pasta boiled. The apartment settled into its evening configuration, warmth and weight, and the small domestic sounds that meant, this is where we live now. Milo's purr started in his sleep. Low, steady, certain. The sound of a compass needle that had finally, impossibly, found true north. The call came on a Tuesday morning. Nora was in her office, halfway through a grant application that was going nowhere, when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Too many robocalls, too many creditors asking about the leaky roof fund. But something made her pick up. Metro Animal Services. This is Nora. Hi, it's Michael. Milo's... A pause. Milo's person. Nora's chest tightened. 3 weeks since the adoption, right in the window when returns usually happened. She'd been bracing for this call since the day he left. Is everything okay? Yeah. Better than okay. I wanted to tell you what we found out. She listened. For 15 minutes, she didn't interrupt, didn't breathe. Just listened as Michael explained the vet visit, the microchip records, the mobile clinic notes, the impossible convergence of scent and sound and spatial memory that had turned 20 failed placements into one perfect match. When he finished, the silence stretched. Nora? I'm here. Her voice cracked. Give me a second. She put the phone on speaker and pressed her palms against her eyes. Behind her, the countdown clock read 78 days remaining. It didn't matter anymore. Can I share this? She asked. The details. What Dr. Reyes explained. We have 6 other blind cats right now, and I think, God, Michael, I think we've been doing this all wrong. Share whatever helps. And can I... She swallowed hard. Can I tell the staff? They need to know it wasn't their fault. That Milo wasn't broken. He was never broken, Michael said quietly. He was just waiting. The staff room erupted. Nora printed the email Michael sent, 3 pages of detailed notes from Dr. Reyes, complete with the mobile clinic's behavioral annotations and a breakdown of sensory mapping theory. She called an emergency meeting at 4 p.m. Tom, Rachel, and 7 volunteers crowded into the break room, exhausted from the afternoon adoption rush. I need you to hear something, Nora said. She read the whole thing. The Harborview fire, the 4C4D connection, the amber and sandalwood cologne, the shuffle-tap-shuffle footfall, the humming, the rebuilt apartment with its identical acoustic blueprint, the fact that Milo hadn't been refusing homes, he'd been refusing sensory maps that didn't match the one etched into him by trauma and memory. By the time she finished, Rachel was crying. Tom had his head in his hands. A volunteer named Marcus, who'd been there for Milo's intake 23 months ago, stood up and walked to the window. His shoulders shook. It wasn't us, he whispered. We didn't fail him. No, Nora said. We just didn't know what he needed. Rachel grabbed a marker and the laminated training sheet they used for new fosters, started writing in furious strokes. For blind, trauma animals. 1. Document scent preferences. Cologne, soap, cleaning products. 2. Record acoustic signatures, footfall patterns, humming, ambient sounds. 3. Map spatial memory, furniture placement, thermal sources, textured landmarks. 4. Build sensory consistency before attempting new placements. 5. Match homes to existing maps. Don't force adaptation to foreign ones. She taped it to the wall beside the sink. "We're photocopying this," she said. "Every foster gets a copy, every adopter, every vet in the network." Tom stood and walked to the whiteboard in the hallway, the one with the grid of names and outcomes. Milo's line was still there, 17 red X's marching across the columns like a tally of failure. He picked up a blue marker, circled Milo's name, wrote beside it, "Adopted, found home by other senses." Then he grabbed a green marker, a color they'd never used before, and drew a careful circle around the entire entry. "New symbol," he said. "Green means the animal taught us something." Rachel came over with a second green marker. "We should do this for all of them. Every hard case. Every one that made us better." By the end of the day, 7 green circles marked the board. Animals who'd waited months. Animals who'd been returned. Animals who'd seemed impossible until someone figured out their specific language. The red X's remained. History couldn't be erased. But the green circles transformed them from failures into lessons. The social media post went live on Wednesday. Nora wrote it herself, sitting at her desk at midnight after the shelter had gone quiet. For 23 months, Milo waited. A blind cat who'd survived a fire, lost his person, and refused to settle in 17 different homes. We thought he was difficult. We thought he was traumatized beyond healing. We were wrong. Milo wasn't refusing homes. He was waiting for a very specific sensory map, the sound, scent, and spatial memory of the place he'd lost. When a man walked into our shelter wearing the same cologne, carrying the same footfall pattern, living in the rebuilt version of Milo's original apartment, Milo knew he'd been waiting for home. Thanks to Dr. Reyes at Northside Vet and the mobile disaster clinic that documented Milo's needs 2 years ago, we now understand blind and traumatized animals don't just need love. They need their anchors restored. Milo's story changed how we'll approach every special needs case from now on. He made us better. We're sharing this because there are more Milos out there, more animals waiting for someone to speak their specific language. More homes that could be perfect matches if we just knew how to listen. She attached 3 photos. Milo at intake, face to the wall, body rigid. Milo on adoption day, pressed against Michael's chest, purring. Milo asleep on a vent, peaceful, whole. The post went up at 12:47 a.m. By morning, it had 2,000 shares. By noon, 10,000. The donations started at 2 p.m., small amounts at first, then larger. A woman who'd lost her cat in a house fire sent $500. A man who'd adopted a blind dog 20 years ago sent $1,000. Notes poured in. Thank you for not giving up. Thank you for seeing what he needed. Thank you for showing us it's possible. The board liaison called at 4 p.m. "I'm looking at the donor portal," she said. "What happened?" Nora sent her the link. Silence, then, "Jesus." "We're tabling the capacity discussion," the liaison said. "If one cat can generate this kind of community response, we need to rethink our metrics." The euthanasia deadline, 78 days remaining, became a historical footnote. Milo had bought them breathing room, not just for himself, for every animal that would come after. Michael brought Milo back on Saturday, not to return him, just to visit. Nora met them in the parking lot, hands shaking. "You didn't have to. I wanted you to see him," Michael said. "See that it's real." They used the quiet room, the one reserved for vet techs doing after-hours checkups. Soft lighting, minimal echo, a space Milo had never been in during his shelter stay. Michael set the carrier down and opened the door. Milo emerged cautiously, his ears swiveled, cataloging the new but familiar soundscape. The shelter had its own signature, the distant hum of the HVAC, the slight echo of the main corridor, the faint chemical tang of cleaning solution. He'd lived here for 23 months. The space should have triggered shutdown, should have brought back the stress of waiting, the trauma of failed placements, the sensory nightmare of constant disruption. But Milo just sat, calm, alert, processing. Then he walked to Michael's ankle and pressed against it. The staff who'd gathered at the doorway, Tom, Rachel, Marcus, 3 others, made soft sounds of wonder. "He's different," Rachel whispered. "He's home," Nora said. Michael knelt and let Milo climb into his lap. The purr started immediately, loud, certain, the sound of an animal who knew exactly where he belonged. Nora had brought something. She pulled a small box from her pocket and handed it to Michael. "We wanted you to have this." Inside, a custom-engraved ID tag, circular, brushed silver. On one side, Milo. On the other, "Navigate by heart." Michael's eyes blurred. You found each other in the dark," Nora said. "Both of you. That deserves commemoration." He attached it to Milo's collar, the soft breakaway kind that wouldn't catch on anything. The tag clinked softly against the metal ring. Milo tilted his head, listening to the new sound, then ignored it. One more frequency added to his map. One more anchor that said, "This is who I am now." They left 20 minutes later. The staff lined up at the window, watching Michael's car pull away. Someone started clapping. Then everyone joined. Not loud, not triumphant, just the soft applause of people who'd witnessed something they'd stopped believing was possible. The whiteboard in the hallway caught the afternoon light. 20 red X's under Milo's name. 1 green circle. 1 impossible ending that rewrote the story of what failure meant. That evening, Michael drove to Harborview. The rebuilt complex looked almost identical to the original. Same brick facade, same architectural blandness. But the trees were younger. The parking lot lines were too fresh. Small details that announced this is a reconstruction, not the original. The memorial plaque was in the lobby. Brushed bronze, mounted beside the mailboxes. 7 names etched in clean sans-serif font. Elena Martinez, Unit 4C. Michael stood in front of it for a long time. Milo was in the carrier at his feet, quiet, listening to the lobby's acoustics. The way sound moved in this specific entryway. The thermal signature of the radiators. The familiar but not quite echo of a space rebuilt from blueprints that remembered. Michael pulled a card from his pocket. He'd made it himself, simple, handwritten on cream cardstock, for 4C and 4D. "Thank you for the gift you didn't know you were giving." He found his way home, at T.M. He set it on the small shelf beneath the plaque. Someone would probably throw it away. Maintenance would find it during cleaning and toss it with the junk mail. But for now, it existed. A small acknowledgement that the hallway remembered. That the building held more than just walls and wiring. That somewhere in the overlapping frequencies of 2 apartments and 2 years of grief, a map had been preserved. And a blind cat had followed it home. Outside, winter was softening into early spring. The air still had bite, but the light was changing. Longer afternoons, the first hint of warmth beneath the cold. Michael carried the carrier to the car and set it on the passenger seat. Opened the mesh door so Milo could see, or sense, him better. Milo stepped partially out, nose lifting to catch the scent mixing in the car's small space. Michael's cologne, amber and sandalwood, inevitable now. The coffee he'd spilled that morning, the faint diesel exhaust from the parking lot. And underneath it all, recognition. The specific chemistry that meant my person. Milo climbed onto Michael's lap, pressed his face against Michael's throat, finding the pulse point, breathed him in like oxygen. Michael's hand found Milo's spine, stroking the stripes with fingers that no longer shook. "We're going home," he whispered. Milo's purr answered, steady, certain, a compass needle that had finally stopped searching. They sat in the car for 5 minutes, not moving, not needing to, just existing in the small miracle of being found. Morning became a choreography. Michael's alarm at 6:15. The shuffle to the bathroom. Water running. 2 minutes for teeth, 30 seconds for face. The creak of the bedroom door opening wider. By the time Michael reached the hallway, Milo was already waiting. He sat at the threshold between carpet and tile, ears angled toward the kitchen, whiskers sampling the air for the first hints of coffee grounds and kibble. His tail curled in a question mark. "Morning, buddy," Michael said. Milo chirped. The tapping cadence to breakfast was always the same. Michael's footsteps, Milo 3 paces behind. Tracking the shuffle-tap-shuffle like a rhythm section following the lead. They moved through the apartment in perfect synchronization. Michael to the counter, Milo to the tile seam, both arriving at their positions simultaneously. 3 clicks. Food bowl filled. 2 clicks. Water refreshed. 1 click. "I'm here." Milo ate with the methodical focus of someone who no longer had to brace for disruption. No frantic gulping, no defensive body language, just the soft crunch of kibble and the occasional pause to lift his nose, confirming Michael's location by scent and sound. After breakfast, the window perch. Michael had positioned it specifically, south-facing, directly above the floor vent, so the rising warmth created a thermal column in winter. Milo would stretch in the sun he couldn't see, belly exposed, paws flexed, basking in heat that felt like memory. The ductwork sang its low song beneath him, same frequency as before the fire, same whale call hum that meant home in a language older than sight. Michael watched him sometimes, tried to see the world the way Milo did, as a constellation of anchors rather than images. The click of the tile seam meant food. The shuffle tap meant safety. The sandalwood scent meant my person. The vent's thermal sigh meant rest here. A map built from everything except vision. And it was perfect. The boxes sat in the closet for 3 months. Michael had avoided them with the superstitious dread of someone who knew that opening them would make the loss real in a way it hadn't been while they stayed sealed. Just clothes, his sister had written, nothing important. But Maria's handwriting made them important. The Sharpie loops and the way she'd underlined just as if trying to convince herself. On a Saturday in late March, Michael finally opened them. The first box, sweaters, jeans, a winter coat that still smelled faintly of her peppermint tea. He folded them carefully, set aside the ones he could donate, kept 2 that fit. The second box, kitchen items, a mug with a chipped handle, pot holders shaped like cats, a wooden spoon worn smooth from years of stirring. He kept the mug. The third box, scarves, mittens, a canvas tote bag with the community college logo. One scarf, cream wool with gray stripes, still held the faint ghost of her perfume. Something floral and cheap, the kind sold in 3-packs at drugstores. Michael lifted it to his face and breathed. Milo appeared at his ankle. His nose lifted, whiskers twitching, cataloging the new scent entering their established map. Not sandalwood, not amber. Something else. Something other. But Michael's hand was on the scarf, and Michael's scent was layered over it, so Milo pressed closer instead of retreating. Investigating. Michael carried the scarf to the bedroom and draped it over the bookshelf, the one in the corner where cedar shadows gathered and Milo sometimes slept when the vent got too warm. "This was hers," he said quietly. "My sister's. She lived in 4D. Milo's ears swiveled. "She's the one who gave out the cologne, who hummed off-key, who—" his voice caught. "Who probably saved your life without knowing it. Because if I hadn't been staying with her that night, I wouldn't have been in the hallway, wouldn't have survived, wouldn't have moved back here." Milo climbed onto the bookshelf, navigating around the scarf with careful whisker sweeps. He settled beside it, close enough to catch the scent, but anchored to the familiar cedar wood beneath, adding a new coordinate to his map, making room for one more ghost. Dr. Reyes's email arrived on a Monday. Michael, I've finished digitizing the full mobile clinic record from the Harborview response. Attached are all the behavioral notes, medical records, and intake documentation for Milo. I thought you might want the complete history. Also attached, contact information for the Mobile Disaster Veterinary Network. They do incredible work, often underfunded. If you ever want to support them, I know they'd appreciate it. Milo is lucky to have found you. Dr. Reyes. Michael opened the attachments, 43 pages. Photos from the church gymnasium, rows of carriers, Red Cross cots, exhausted volunteers, handwritten notes on intake forms, the careful documentation of a team trying to save what could be saved in the aftermath of loss. He read every page, found Sarah's handwriting. This boy is looking for something specific. Found the notation about humming, about scent profiles, about the neighbor from 4D. Found the moment someone had cared enough to document the invisible map Milo was carrying. That night, Michael made 2 donations, one to the Mobile Disaster Veterinary Network in Maria's name, for the work of documenting what seems impossible. One to the Harborview Memorial Fund, in honor of Elena Martinez, Unit 4C, for the woman who taught a blind cat to trust the world. The confirmation emails felt like punctuation marks on sentences that had been hanging unfinished for 2 years. Not closure, exactly, but acknowledgement. The debts you couldn't repay except by passing forward. Nora launched the Sensory Map Kit on April 1st. It started small, a laminated checklist for foster families, asking them to document scent preferences, acoustic signatures, thermal spots, textured landmarks. A set of sample materials, sandalwood sachets, lavender alternatives, textured mats, sound files of common household frequencies. Rachel designed the instructions. Tom built the sample kits. Marcus wrote the introductory email that went out to every foster in their network. We learned from a blind cat who waited 23 months that animals don't just need homes, they need their specific map of home restored. This kit helps you build that map. The first week, 12 fosters requested kits. The second week, 30. By the end of the month, shelters in 3 other cities had asked for permission to replicate the program. Milo's story rippled outward, not as inspiration porn, not as a feel-good narrative about disabled animals overcoming odds, but as a blueprint, a practical, replicable system for understanding what home meant to animals who'd lost theirs. Nora kept the original whiteboard in her office, the one with Milo's 20 red X's and single green circle. It became a teaching tool. She'd show it to new volunteers and say, "These aren't failures, these are coordinates. Each one taught us something that led to the right match." The red X's transfigured, no longer marks of inadequacy, but waypoints on a map. Each failed placement had eliminated a wrong frequency, narrowed the search, brought Milo one step closer to the exact acoustic signature he'd been waiting for. 20 rejections weren't 20 failures. They were 20 data points leading to one perfect solution. The final image came on a quiet Thursday. Michael was sitting on the couch, laptop open, answering emails from work. The apartment was settling into its evening configuration, lights dimming as the sun set, radiators ticking on, the ambient hum of the building coming alive. He hummed without thinking. The mangled tune, Maria's tune, the melody that had drifted through walls and years and fire. Milo was on the cushion beside him, sprawled in the boneless sprawl of complete relaxation. His paw lifted, extended toward Michael's hand. Threaded through his palm, the same gesture from the shelter 23 months ago, when Milo had reached through the bars of his enclosure toward the one person whose frequency finally matched. But this time, it wasn't a summons. It was a ritual. Michael's fingers closed gently around the paw. Milo's purr started, low, steady, the frequency of contentment so deep it didn't need volume. They sat like that for 20 minutes, not moving, not needing to, just existing in the small miracle of belonging. Outside, spring evening light turned the windows gold. Somewhere in the building, someone was cooking dinner. Garlic and onions, the smell drifting through vents. A door closed in the hallway. Footsteps passed. Someone else's shuffle-tap-shuffle that wasn't quite right, wasn't quite home. Milo's ears tracked it, but didn't follow. He'd found his frequency, didn't need to search anymore. Michael looked down at the blind cat who'd rejected 17 families, who'd waited in a shelter for almost 2 years, refusing to settle, holding out for the impossible convergence of scent and sound and spatial memory that logic said wouldn't come. "You knew, didn't you?" Michael whispered. "You knew what you were waiting for." Milo's whiskers twitched. His paw squeezed tighter, claws gently flexing, not in distress, but in emphasis. "Yes, I knew." Michael's throat tightened. All those failed placements, all those families who'd tried and failed, all those red X's on the whiteboard. Milo hadn't been rejecting people. He'd been navigating by memory, following a map etched into him by the specific frequencies of one apartment, one person, one constellation of sensory anchors that trauma had burned into permanence. The shelter staff had thought he was broken. The adopters had thought he was difficult. Even Michael had thought he was lucky, that he'd stumbled into the right match through impossible coincidence. But it wasn't luck. It was navigation. Milo had been traveling toward home the entire time. Each rejection had eliminated a wrong coordinate. Each failed placement had refined the search. Each day in the shelter had been another day of waiting for the exact acoustic signature that meant here. And when Michael walked in, wearing the scent, carrying the footfall pattern, living in the rebuilt echo of the place Milo had lost, the navigation ended. Not because Milo settled for close enough, but because close enough was home for an animal who'd learned that home wasn't a place. It was a frequency. Night settled fully. Michael closed his laptop, carried Milo to the bedroom, set him on the vent where the warmth rose and the ducts sang their low song. Milo circled once, twice, settled with his nose pointed toward the door, always aware of exit routes, even in safety. Michael climbed into bed. The humming started unconsciously, soft, formless, the tune that belonged to Maria and Elena and every person who'd ever lived in these walls and tried to make them feel less empty. Milo's purr answered. Echo and response. Two frequencies that had traveled separate paths through fire and loss and 23 months of searching. Finally, harmonizing. Michael's hand found Milo's spine in the darkness, the blind cat who'd navigated by memory, the grieving man who'd carried home without knowing. Both of them proof that sometimes the impossible thing was just the right coordinates finally aligning. "Good night, buddy," Michael whispered. Milo's purr deepened. Outside, the city hummed. Inside, the apartment held them both. Two survivors who'd learned that you didn't need to see home to find it. You only needed to hear it, breathe it, and feel it beat.